This time, Arsene's Arsenal arrival.
'Cause I'll stay a wild rover forever and more.
Hello and welcome to By Far the Greatest Team, a podcast in which football fans attempt the impossible to rank once and for all who is the greatest team of all time. My name's Graham Dunn, making the case for Oxford United, and joining me as ever, it's the king of the data, Jamie Rooney.
Hello, Graham, once again. I think this is what we can probably call our fourth big team in a row, and in terms of what we've done recently. So your lower league teams are taking the battering at the moment. And what I'm excited about is, Graham, is that we're going to talk through this football team, and we're going to finish in May 1998, where we can all agree that We Like to Party by the Wenger Boys was probably the greatest hit of all time, right?
And I assume they were related. I'm sure they were related.
It's one of the same, surely. I mean, that's what we're here to talk about, right?
Oh, what a nightmare. Yes, good to pick this team up. Arsenal are actually we have sort of touched on them before with the Arsenal Stadium mystery, but that was really mostly about the film rather than anything else. But this is probably the last of the big English sides that we haven't done yet. We've sort of been wrestling away with this because there's sort of an elephant in the room, because if you are doing By Far the Greatest Team, there is one really obvious team that you could do who are clearly a brilliant, absolutely great team. But we sort of thought even more interesting than that is just taking that story back a little bit earlier into where it all began, when Arsène Wenger arrived. And delighted we got joining us Arsenal fan Andrew Walker. Hi, Andrew.
Hi, Graham. Hi, Jamie. Thanks for having me back again.
You joined us in our brilliant Barbarians, attempted Barbarians team, which is essentially a kind of pub night discussion turned into can you pick a brilliant team?
It was good fun though. We had some good players in that team, and they could have gone quite deep into that tournament, if I remember rightly.
Definitely.
But thanks for having me on for this team. And I do think when you're talking about great Arsenal teams, we obviously think about the Invincibles. But for me, I feel like maybe this Wenger side gets a little bit forgotten about in the Premier League era.
Is this essentially your first kind of Arsenal side? What could you kind of remember of this side? How old were you then?
I would have been about 8. It's the first FA Cup final that I really remember. It was my first Arsenal shirt that I was ever bought as well. So Euro 96 is like my sort of earliest football memory of actually understanding what the hell was going on the television at the time. And for Arsenal, it was this season, and getting the shirt and the cup final, and spending the day sat in front of the telly from 9 a.m. right up until the 3 o'clock kickoff, as we always used to do.
Yeah. Those are the great days. I kind of miss the all day long cup final day. So, and this is a bizarre time, because it is quite, you kind of remember or think now how commonplace it is to have a non-British manager. But Wenger coming in was an absolute bolt from the blue, really, and it really was quite breaking the mould.
Yeah, and you've got David Dean to thank for that, Arsenal vice chairman at the time. It was a bit of an appointment from left field. I believe they met each other in the late 80s, early 90s, when he was managing Monaco. But when Wenger went from Monaco, so he was out in Japan for quite a few years, and the Arsenal team had kind of really stagnated under George Graham, and then we had a fairly unconventional, unsuccessful time under Bruce Rioch that nobody quite remembers. I mean, I think Arsenal fans will, but if you don't support Arsenal, you don't really remember that time when he was in charge. It was a little bit of that, a little bit like the Emery era in between Wenger and Arteta. And so David Dean recommended to the board that we go down this route of appointing Arsene who, and even the players, I think, at the time were like Ian Wright quite famously was like, well, who the hell is this guy? He looks like a school teacher. And Yeah, he was really plucked out of nowhere and he had to get to work straight away.
You're absolutely right, Andrew. It was David Dean, and he should take a lot of credit for this decision because he backs Wenger from the very beginning. And I think it was when he was with Monaco and he was in London and he went to watch Arsenal, and David Dean was aware of this and then just invited Wenger to his house for a meal the next day. And I think their relationship stuck from there. And then Wenger was kind of disillusioned with French football. Graham, you should remember this Marseille scandal, early 1990s when Wenger was in France with Monaco. I think Wenger, who we're going to go on and discuss, is a pretty stand-up, principled individual, just got a bit disheartened with the state of French football and went off to explore the delights and the diet of Japan.
I love that he's at Grand Passat, which sounds more like a planet you'd hear on Star Trek than a football club, doesn't it? So there's a couple foreign managers who have been in charge before, haven't there, Jamie?
So Wenger's not the first. So we've talked about Joseph Weghorst previously. So at Aston Villa, he replaced Graham Taylor in the early 1990s. And then I think Ozzy Ardiles, Graham has had a short spell with Newcastle and Swindon. But in terms of top flight English football, I think that's about it, really. No one's really made their name in English football if you haven't got an English, Scottish or British connection, really. So when Wenger comes, I think it's 90% of the league are British or associated with being Anglophile. And that was the norm back then. That was the norm. Wenger was the exception. And you're right. I do remember him arriving, and I think Ferguson took a swipe at him as well, because Ferguson had no idea who he was and kind of questioned, what does this guy know about English football? And it really was Wenger who. And I think Ian Wright who called him Inspector Clouseau as well, the school teacher?
Yes, he did.
Yeah. It was just it was stereotypes on acid. It really was.
The players talk about just how sort of clumsy he was as well, like around the training ground. And I think like the culture you had at the time of like those British managers who you can imagine them going in the dressing room and really giving the players a dressing down and shouting, and Fergie giving the hairdryer treatment to everyone. And Wenger has never been like that. In fact, I think there's only one time where apparently Wenger's really lost it in the dressing room, and that was away at Anfield in the noughties, actually, which is the only time that players talk about that. So he came in with a very, very different, radical approach. But I think David Dean obviously knew at the time this was an ageing squad. The football was pretty dire at times. The team was in a downward trajectory. So in order to try and even get back to a point where you were challenging Man United, we had to think outside the box, and that was where the appointment came from, I guess.
Yeah, because you've got, obviously Wenger replaces Bruce Rioch, but you had George Graham clearly before that, who had brilliant success with Arsenal. But then it's funny how memory does play trick on the mind. But George Graham seemed to be becoming more belonging to the 1-0 to the Arsenal slogan more and more and more. He seemed to be getting more and more defensive, and a great manager for Arsenal with great success. He kind of ruined it for himself because he was then attached to potential payments for signing players from Denmark. So it kind of turned sour, and it hit Arsenal in this strange period where they weren't even competing in the top 4 positions in the league any longer, where they had been, predominantly a top team.
It's an extraordinary journey, actually, because as you say, the George Graham side that wins the title, the famous Michael Thomas one, is a fantastic, youthful, free-flowing. They're so fresh, Rocastle, players like that. It's just the freshest side you could have. And yet within a few years, I saw an amazing stat I just still can't quite believe. I think it's the 03 for the first Premier League season. Arsenal finished 10th, so not great, but finished 10th, but score the lowest number of goals of anyone in the league, even Forest to get relegated.
Yeah. I think the press had labelled them boring Arsenal. I think that's kind of where it comes from, that particular period. But yeah, that all changes. But Bruce Rioch, I think, does one pretty brilliant thing for Arsenal.
He does. He does do one brilliant thing, and we can talk about Dennis Bergkamp all night because he's my childhood hero. But yeah, a lot of if you don't support Arsenal, maybe you don't know this, but yes, it was Bruce Rioch who went and bought Dennis Bergkamp, and so he was already So I think when Wenger came in, he inherited a very, very disciplined back line from George Graham, and obviously he had the flair and finesse of Bergkamp up front. So he didn't come in and tear up the team straight away. He was quite like that. Four really did serve him well for his first few years when he first came into Arsenal. But he really did. It was how he kind of built on those players and his early sign. I mean, Vieira was actually signed just before Wenger started, but I think it was pretty much a done deal, and there was a lot of influence around Wenger saying he wanted to have him in as part of the midfield with Petit as well, and then it brought in Mark Overmars on the wing as well, and then a 17-year-old Nicolas Anelka for £500,000. What a bargain that was!
Yeah, incredible. I mean, I could quite happily talk about Dennis Bergkamp all day as well. I think he's one of my most favourite players I've ever seen. And you couldn't not like this Arsenal team with Dennis Bergkamp in, because, I mean, the guy was just a luxury. I just used to wax lyrical about him all the time. And my only regret that he was playing for Arsenal and not Manchester United, which would have been lovely. But a fantastic footballer. I think one of the best footballers who's ever played in the Premier League. And I think he probably gets lost to history a bit now when we talk about Premier League. But I think Dennis Bergkamp is quite comfortably in the mix when you talk about the greatest players that have played in the Premier League.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to disagree with you on that. And I was lucky enough, actually, and we are going to get Oxford United in this podcast, would you believe it? Because Dennis Bergkamp
Don't encourage him.
Dennis Bergkamp scored his 100th goal for Arsenal at Highbury in the FA Cup against Oxford United. And Graham, I believe you were there in the clock end.
I was there.
So I would have been at the opposite side of the pitch in the North Bank with my uncle to see him put that one in. So yeah, a little bit of history, and I was very pleased I was there.
Yeah, I mean, he was just a staggeringly good player. But you're absolutely right. This is kind of like I think, Jamie, you used the word. This is like a hybrid team, isn't it? This is, you can see things that, and there's loads of Wenger touches and influences to it. But there's also a fair bit of traditional Arsenal there, particularly with that defence.
Yeah, the back five. I mean, Andrew could talk about that back five better than I can, but I mean, they were super established. And I think, Andrew, you already mentioned they were disciplined. They were winners. I mean, most of that back five, I think, played definitely in the 91 championship. I don't know about the 89 championship, but they'd won a couple of cups as well. That team, the Arsenal team, they won the League Cup, the FA Cup, a Cup Winners' Cup as well. So it's not as if they weren't used to winning things. They had a winning mentality. And credit to Wenger. I mean, we could probably get on to talk about what Wenger does off the pitch, which I think is crucial. But on the pitch, yeah, very sensible. He's improving the midfield with Vieira and Petit. He's making a player out of Dennis Bergkamp, and he signed this incredible player, as Andrew mentioned, Nicolas Anelka, who, when he first hit the Premier League, oh my God, this guy was special. His speed was just breathtaking.
He's one of those players for me, Anelka, where you kind of, when we got into that 99 season, especially those last couple of months, it was like he'd already decided he was leaving Arsenal. And then, I mean, he went on and had a great career, but he played for so many clubs, and you do kind of wonder if he'd have just stuck with Arsenal, how amazing would he have been our record goal scorer? Would we have ever have gone on and signed Thierry Henry? There are all of these questions that sort of come into play. But for the first couple of seasons, he was fantastic, and he came in at just the right time, because it was that transition out from Ian Wright as well, who'd led the line for so many years. And he was starting up front at the start of that 97-98 season, but then towards the end, it really was Anelka who was leading the charge, and then went on and scored in the cup final. But there was, with this team in particular, whilst that starting 11 was fantastic and you had some real stars in there, the thing that I really loved about this team was we actually had some quite serious injuries to key key moments of the season. Bergkamp actually missed the cup final and semi-final as well. And so Christopher Wray had to step in, who a lot of people won't really know who he was, but was a kind of one season wonder for us, and scored goals at vital moments of the season. In midfield as well, you had Stephen Hughes, who popped up when there were key injuries to the midfielders and scored 2 fantastic goals against Chelsea in the title run-in. And then in goal as well, you had this really was a key moment of the season. David Seaman got injured. I think it was right around early March time. So right when Arsenal went on we actually went on like a 10 game running streak at that time, and everyone just shit themselves when Seaman got injured, because they just thought, well, what the hell are we going to do now? And then up steps the finest Austrian goalkeeper you've ever seen, which is Alex Manninger, who was in goal for the game where we went and played United at Old Trafford and kept 6 Premier League clean sheets as well. Premier League Player of the Month. Just these random players who had to come in for a fairly small part of the season just really stepped up, and we didn't skip a beat, and it was at such a vital point, and they all contributed to what was a great season in the end.
In the pod last week, we were talking about Bill Shankly's Liverpool from 1966 or something like that, and they win the title essentially with just 12 players playing. That's all they are. And this Arsenal side, it's almost the polar opposite, because, as you say, I mean, in my mind, it would be the same back 4 each time, be Adams, Bold, Winterburn and Dixon. But that's actually kind of based on your memory of them having always been there. With players that play in the stats for that season, I think there's only like 5 players who play 30 league games there. There are a lot of players who end up 20 league appearances or so, because of those injuries. It is a weird kind of thing.
And Manninger, actually, if you want a bit of a useless Premier League stat, well, back then you would have to have 10 Premier League games to get a medal. So Manninger had 7 appearances, but because he'd kept 6 clean sheets and had been awarded a Premier League Player of the Month, he got granted special dispensation at the end of the season, and so he does have a Premier League winners' medal to this day.
Actually, it is difficult to imagine and it could only happen with a goalkeeper, couldn't it? It's the only possible position where you could play enough games and do sufficiently well on it to be the Premier League Player of the Month, and yet not play enough games to qualify for a medal. It's bizarre. We'll get on to how the season unfolded in a bit, but in terms of this old and new kind of territory, so I was quite, I'm already slightly surprised that David Platt is still playing at that stage. He doesn't play a huge amount, but he's still part of it. And I think one of the players who plays the most games for Arsenal is Ray Parlour.
Yeah, and totally reborn under Wenger, really. And a player who, a bit like Arsenal, were on a downward trajectory at the time. Maybe his career was stagnating a bit. And he talks quite openly about when Wenger first came in and changed the drinking culture, which, there's no surprise of Ray Parlour and Tony Adams and Paul Merson were kind of at the centre of the let's go for a beer after training. But Parlour talks about when they would finish the games and go into the players' club, and the fridge was always full of beers. And then from game week 1, Wenger just went up there and just chucked it all out and filled it up with orange juice, and everyone's going, well, what the hell's this? But and then they've gone into the canteen, and then it's the famous no more Mars bars, no tomato ketchup, and all you're going to eat now is broccoli and fish. But he didn't really have a choice but to get on board with this. And he does say that once they went through that early period where they stuck to this regime that Wenger was harping on about, all of a sudden they felt like supermen, and they could run through walls. They had so much more energy. And I mean, Parler's best years were ahead of him. He was superb in the 2002 double winning season as well. So it's not like this was sort of at the end of his career. He still had many years ahead of him after this.
Well, it kind of reflects probably more societal culture as well at the time. So obviously it's in football. I think most clubs had a reputation of kind of some kind of drinking club through the 80s and 90s. Arsenal were no exception to that. But I think, Wenger's come in with fresh eyes and decided this is not how you run top elite football teams. And so I think what he does, he doesn't really invent the diet as such. He just enforces standards. He puts in the kind of the best practices you can be to be at peak performance. And funny enough, it pays off. Who knew alcohol was bad for you? I mean, what a shocker. And I think a lot of this comes from his time in Japan, from what I understand as well. I think he'd seen in Japan has a different type of diet, and they reduce fats in terms of what they eat. There's a lot of protein. So, and Japan is well known for people living healthy into their 80s and 90s, and the average age, life expectancy, is quite high. So I think this must have left some impression on Arsène Wenger in his time in Japan. And I think he's already a quality coach before he goes to Japan, but I think Japan just helped shape him in terms of being more of a complete coach. And then he brings these ideas into the English game. Although Graham, I am a little conflicted on this, because I'm absolutely giving Wenger credit for bringing a different type of diet into professional football in England. But we shouldn't overlook the fact that this is also around about the time that Ready, Steady, Cook and Can't Cook, Won't Cook TV shows started flooding our daytime TV. So, who influenced who? Wenger influenced TV? Did TV influence Wenger? I'm not so sure.
You're suggesting that Ainsley Harriott deserves some kind of assist for this.
I could track it all the way back there if we really wanted to go there. I'm pretty sure that Ainsley Harriott and his green peppers is responsible for why professional athletes in England perform at the top level since the mid-1990s. And it's got nothing to do with Wenger. It really hasn't. It's all Ainsley Harriott.
The fact that Wenger did have this new crop of players coming in, and where it wasn't like he was just going into the old boys club and saying, that's it, you can't drink anymore. There was new players coming in, and Bergkamp especially was very hot on, what are you eating, and alcohol as well. He says in his book about when he first signed for Arsenal, and went on a pre-season tour to Sweden, where they're busting a gut on the training pitch in the heat to try and get fit for the season ahead. And then, so they finished their training regimes, and he's gone for a walk around town and had dinner with his wife, and he's walked past this bar, and Merson and Parler and Adams and everyone's in this bar with a load of Arsenal fans. They've gone on quite a long walk for the evening to chill out, and then as they're going back to the hotel, they've walked past it again, and of course they're all still in there until the early hours of the morning. And then he's watching them on the training field, and he says, he couldn't believe, you're killing yourself at night, and then you're coming on the training pitch and you're doing this. He didn't understand how they do it. So whilst Wenger would have obviously been saying to them, you can't do this anymore, guys, he would have had players who were well and truly on board with that. So, Wenger says every win bought him a little more time, and people bought into that concept a bit more. And you think, when they went on that title charge and the 10 Premier League wins, once it sort of got to March 1998, it was all clicking, and the team was unstoppable. So if you're getting the results, you're just going to carry on doing it, aren't you?
You're absolutely right, because if the first 10 games hadn't gone well for him, clearly you can imagine the uproar amongst the players who would definitely have, and it would set back foreign coaches and the influence of kind of diet and looking after yourself properly in the English game, probably a decade, because people would be constant. No. Do you remember that chap Arsène, whatever his name was, came in and made everyone eat fish?
But I mean, the British press at the time were quite disparaging of Arsène Wenger. They gave him a rough time. They didn't trust him. he was ridiculed especially in the red top papers right from the very beginning. There was some kind of made up scandal about him as well, just to kind of sensationalize story. It was really sad the way that he was welcomed into the country. It was almost like, we don't want your silly ideas that you're bringing into our game. We've got a game and we like it. But without Arsène Wenger, we don't have the Premier League we have now. He is the shift change, I believe, because he comes in and he shows people the light, and he is supported by his players. And one of those players, Andrew, I don't think we mentioned that he brings in early on, an incredible footballer in Mark Overmars, who I think Ferguson tried to sign him a couple of times because of his pace. But Overmars is just sensational, an incredible player. And I think he plays out on the right, because Wenger plays this 4-4-2 system, doesn't he? And Parlour kind of sit on the left and Overmars on the right. And Overmars was just an absolute destroyer. I mean, his pace and skill and the way he linked up as well was just sensational. Fantastic footballer.
Yeah, and went on and famously got the winner at Old Trafford at a time as well. There were quite a few key injuries to players there. I mean, that game, I sort of vaguely remember watching that game and Martin Tyler sort of saying that at times he was almost taking on the United back line single-handedly. It was like he was on a one-man mission. And then, of course, up the other end, you've got Alex Manninger performing incredible saves and stopping everything that United are throwing at us. And then eventually he gets his goal in the second half. And that game really, it felt like the title had, obviously there was still work to do after that game, but it really did feel like the title had well and truly been won. And I don't know if maybe that was when Fergie realised that diet and the alcohol and everything, that was when he would have gone to the drawing board himself that summer and looked at it. Because I feel like Fergie actually was quite worried about Wenger. He really went on the defensive when he first came in, and he said, well, he's been in Japan, he doesn't know anything about English football. But it was quite clear that we were catching them up quickly after Christmas.
I think there's an argument, but we haven't really focused on the 96-97 season when Wenger comes in, but I think there's an argument, and Wenger been there earlier in the season. They may have pushed United that season as well, so I think they finished 8-10 points, I can't remember exactly, behind. But had Wenger been there for the full season, not coming in, I think in the November, could have been a different story.
You could certainly see that Ferguson starts to realise that pizza isn't for eating, it's for throwing. So that win at United in the 97-98 season is the turning point moment. But Arsenal are a long way behind in that title race, aren't they? I mean they start okay, but obviously Wenger's had sort of half a season or so in charge. That season's gone quite well. They finished third in that first year, I think, under Wenger. Overmars comes in. The arrival of Petit makes a big difference, doesn't it? Because you start to get to this. It's quite odd. This is another of the weird kind of hybrid things that happens with Wenger, is that he sort of invents the giant machine, physical athlete in the centre of midfield with Vieira and Petit, and then towards the end of his career ends up, oh no, you got to have a small man in the middle. But having that physicality in the centre of midfield, having two players like that they are absolute dominant, aren't they, Petit and Vieira?
And a leader as well. I mean, we did have a great leader at the back, but those Vieira versus Keane moments, really got going in that. That famous game actually before that Old Trafford game, the 3-2 victory that Arsenal had at United, and Vieira was immense in that game, and you could see the rivalry sort of sparking between those players. And then when Adams eventually went and retired, it was obvious who was going to take the captain's armband after him, because he was just a real leader on the pitch and getting you up the pitch as well. He was just such a box-to-box, so physical, just your complete midfielder. And we really struggled when Vieira left. We couldn't really replace a player like that for many years, really.
And I think it took a couple of months for the full relationship to blossom between Vieira and Petit in midfield and Adams and Bold and Keown, whoever would have been on the other side to take shape. Because yeah, you're right, Graham. I think Arsenal start off the first 12 games are unbeaten, 6 wins, 6 draws, and then November, December they have a really rocky time where they lose 4 or 6 games. And I think, Andrew, you have to keep me honest here if I got this right, but I think after the Blackburn loss at Highbury 3-1, there's a kind of an argument between Adams and Vieira and Petit that Adams feels he's not getting the right protection, and they're kind of throwing insults at each other. And I think they use that, they galvanize that to kind of like pull themselves together and work out that they have the collective strengths to be very good, better than what they are at that particular moment. And I think they channel that energy into what happens next. And what happens next is this incredible run. But I think it took them just a little bit of while to work out. And I think, Graham, it goes back to your point. You've got like the old guard, this like back 5 or back 6 if you've got Bold Keown as well in there, as sharing the centre back duty with Tony Adams, and then you've got Wenger's new spine through the midfield. So, and I think Wenger's not confrontational, is he? He never came across as somebody who liked to. I mean, he could be provocative, but he was never confrontational. So I can't imagine even with the players. And Andrew, you mentioned that he was calm and he had this assurance about him, the way he would deal with his players. I can't imagine Arsène Wenger dealing with confrontation super well. So maybe he was quite happy for the players, these big characters, Tony Adams, Patrick Vieira, Emmanuel Petit, just to sort it out themselves. Have I got that completely wrong?
No, he was always, well, so I'm told, he was always about sort of giving the players ownership, and it was all about expressing yourself. And as long as everyone buys into our philosophy, it's kind of where towards the end everyone got a bit naffed off with Wenger, because it's like there was never really a plan B. It was like you played the Arsenal way, and if it didn't work, there just never was a plan B. It was always just pass the ball, try and pass it into the net. So he would give the players a lot of ownership about that, and never really, dressing downs at half time and dressing room humiliation, shouting at players. It just wasn't his style. But I'm pretty sure that the likes of Tony Adams and Patrick Vieira could do a fair bit of shouting as well. And also I think in that, whilst Vieira and Petit are running that midfield, it was also the way that he was kind of playing a traditional 4-4-2 in a sense, but Bergkamp always played that role where he was always just a little bit behind the striker. And whilst Bergkamp scored some amazing goals, he was also tremendous at assisting players, finding space and his passing as well. That really was he was the proper number 10, if you like.
Arsenal do go on this amazing run, but not before they have a home game against Wimbledon abandoned because of a floodlight failure. Now, neither me or Andrew heard about this, but Jamie, you've got a bit of detail. This isn't quite as rare. Floodlight failure. I mean, I've been at a game which got called off from floodlight failure. It was I wonder if it was that season. It happened now and then. That's just like power cut England. That's kind of what happens. But there was a bit more to this, wasn't there?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to tread carefully because we could kind of bleed into territory where I might say things that may get us into trouble. But so when Arsenal play Wimbledon at Selhurst Park, this is when Wimbledon are playing at Selhurst Park, and this is a good Wimbledon team, a very good Wimbledon team still. They just about to begin the second half. It's goalless after half time, and the floodlights fail. And they try to bring the floodlights back on, but it just doesn't happen. So the game is abandoned and everyone's sent home. That was the third match that season in the English Premier League where there'd been a floodlight failure. There was an incident at Derby County, and there was also an incident at Upton Park with West Ham United where the floodlights had failed again. And I think what's come out of this is all part of a Far East syndicate where they were basically, I believe, from what I've read, and this is only what I've read, and I don't know if this is the case, but I think there were multiple betting incidents going on. The fact that there would be these floodlights failures, so it was all linked to a scam. So floodlights were being sabotaged essentially on the basis that there'd been a flood of bets placed on certain outcomes in the Far East where people would benefit from this financially.
Well, what it definitely demonstrates is if you ever wonder, is there anything in the world that people won't bet on? Well,
It's
that definitely is. What a random thing. And I wonder whether they sort of tried to cover themselves by doing, I could have a fiver on Christopher Wray to get the first goal and another fiver on Adams and a 2-1 Arsenal. And what's the matter? Put 50 on a floodlight failure.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the detail. It may not be. It might just be the football match doesn't finish, and the odds of a football match not finishing are going to be incredibly high, aren't they? Because most football matches that start end unless something catastrophic happens. And floodlight failures were quite a rarity. I mean, they did happen. They definitely happened in the early days of football when floodlights was a fairly new thing in the 1950s. But generally, by the 1990s, you could trust floodlights. But it's quite critical because that game's on the 22nd of December, and it's come on the back of a run where Arsenal won 2 out of the last 6. So, and then they have an extra couple of days before they go into the busy Christmas period, and then they go on a run. And that Wimbledon game doesn't get played until early March. So it's kind of moved later down the season. It does create a number of things. It creates, and because Arsenal, we shouldn't forget, are doing really well in both cup competitions. So in December, the FA Cup hasn't started for Arsenal, but they're doing well in the League Cup as well. So they also go on a run in the FA Cup. So Arsenal are slowly unable to fulfill their league positions all the time because they're involved in other matches and there's postponement with Wimbledon. So they're banking results. And this really does lead and plays into the narrative of the game at Old Trafford, which Andrew's talked about. Because going into that, United are 9 points clear, but Arsenal have 3 games in hand. And I think that's why probably Ferguson felt that was the turning point when Arsenal come away with 3 points, because suddenly Arsenal are in the ascendancy and they're on an incredible run. Ironically, I think it's 10 games they win in a row, Andrew. The first one is 1-0 against Wimbledon away in the rearranged fixture. That's the first.
Yeah, March really was. I think they won every game in March, and it was 1-0 in every game. But also crucially, there was a real blessing in disguise right at the start of this season, because we've not even mentioned European football, which was just a cataclysmic failure in the the UEFA Cup. Getting knocked out in the first round to Park Salonika. So when it came to the run-in and those later games and being, I mean, like you said, we got to the semi-finals of the League Cup as well and lost to Chelsea. But actually going deep into those cup competitions and having the fixture congestion and games in hand over United, not having to worry about the UEFA Cup really did kind of play into our hands then. I felt like we kind of had to mention that European game.
It is probably worth flagging that, because I think especially when we get to ranking the team, how they do in Europe may take
it was the one sore spot really for the first few seasons under Wenger. It really didn't go too well. We did actually play that home game at Highbury as well, that I believe we lost that 1-0 to Park Salonika. And then it wasn't until the following season that we ended up playing our home games at Wembley. Which commercially made a lot of sense, but results-wise was total disaster.
The other thing that's extraordinary about this run, and it actually begins even before this run, is, so I mean, they are playing a far better brand of football. They've got some real entertainers on the pitch. But actually, this run is kind of, this is where you have this hybrid Arsenal, this mix of the old, because it is some old school defending. I think there's 8 clean sheets in a row at one point, and defensively, they are absolutely brilliant.
Rock solid. And then right at the end, when it all came down to a win against Everton at Highbury that would finally seal the title, it was Tony Adams who was famously put through by Steve Bold. You couldn't write it, could you? To then smash it in the back of the net at the North Bank, and it's all smiles and party in the May sunshine.
If you need any evidence that Wenger has achieved something absolutely extraordinary, revolutionising the football, seeing Bold and Adams link up.
Steve Bold
and
with
it's
a
in open play.
Bergkamp through ball.
It is in open play. I mean, funny enough, I can only think of one experience where that's happened before, and that was in the last minute of added time at Old Trafford, where Gary Pallister crosses for Steve Bruce. But this goal is so much better. I mean, Bold's chip is beautiful. It's so perfectly weighted. And then it kind of bounces in an awkward spot for Adams, and he seems to just kind of maneuver his body, shift the ball with almost his hip, and then almost in the same movement, just smashes it. And the celebration is Cantona-esque. It's just wonderful. I just love it. It's just a beautiful celebration from Tony Adams. And, a great, I know he's still got games to play, but coming towards the end of his Arsenal career, it's just a wonderful way to finish off.
And there is a statue of of him doing that celebration outside the Emirates. If you're ever up there,
I think we should give mention to the fullbacks in this team as well, because both Dixon and Winterburn have been there for a long time. I think they're 34 and 35. They're not young at all. And I think it's down to the diet and the regime that Wenger's brought in that's kind of allowed these two to play on longer than what they were probably expecting. I think Lee Dixon has already said that previously, that Wenger gave him a couple of years that he wasn't even expecting. But they play over 30 games. So when you mentioned there's only a handful of players that play 30 games or more in the Premier League in this season, Winterburn and Dixon are right up there.
And he did like to play expansive football. He did like to push his fullbacks up. And Winterburn and Dixon were sort of no exception in that. I mean, later on, we then had Ashley Cole and Lauren in those positions, who were really aggressive fullbacks. But he did like to get them forward. As a kid as well, like I remember when England went into the World Cup in '98, and being like 8 or 9 years old, I just was so baffled that Glenn Hoddle just didn't pick the Arsenal back line and just take it to France '98, because I was just like, well, why would you not just pick that up and drop them in England shirts and away you go? I never really understood how, Lee Dixon and Winterburn never got, were never really seen in an England shirt, but yet for Arsenal they were so solid.
I think Howard Wilkinson, when he took over for England for one game as a caretaker, I think after Graham Taylor and before Terry Venables, he actually did play the Arsenal back four and David Seaman. So he adopted that idea. He played the five of them. And I think it might be the one and only cap that Winterburn got. I'm not sure how many England caps he got, but that might be the one and only one he did.
Jeremy, it's interesting. You pointed out, so Arsenal win the title there with, I think it's 78 points, which is, relatively speaking, quite a low total. I mean, we should probably flag that they do lose their last two games where they're resting players because they've got the cup final to go. So, there's an argument that they could have got a few more if they needed to, but it's still a relatively low total. And especially when you look at how many points did Arsenal get the year they chased City down, and a couple of years ago they've got 90 plus, didn't they?
Yeah, 80 plus points.
And you don't pick anything up.
And Liverpool had what was it, 99?
99. Didn't win it. Yeah,
and didn't win it. And it's kind of got to that time now where you could afford to drop maybe 2 or 3 losses and draw a few. Now you've got to be pretty much perfect. I mean, just at the start of this season, I think we were only in like game 4, and my uncle's saying to me, "Us, just every game is massive already." And you can't bear to be like 4 points behind, otherwise it just seems impossible. But it was a different time and a different era of football. There was quite a few draws that were had. Arsenal did start the season, we weren't losing, but we were a bit sluggish at the start. I think we had like draws away at Leeds on the opening game. We had a game against Leicester at Filbert Street as well, where Dennis Bergkamp scores an incredible hat-trick. I think it got goal 1, 2 and 3 on Match of the Day's Goal of the Month competition. But we ended up drawing that game 3-3. And there was quite a few of them sprinkled through the season.
But yeah, Graham, going back to your points, I think Andrew's already answered it. It was, 78 points is low when we reflect on it now, but at the time it wasn't. United won the league the season before was 75, and United then go win the league the season after was 79. And the average amount of points in the 1990s for winning the Premier League was 78. The highest was 82. In the 2000, the average goes to 87. And in the 2010s, the average goes into 92. So, and I think that's down to a lot of things. And Andrew already touched on it. You've got deeper squads now in the Premier League. You've got, eight on your bench, and they're all internationals. Arsène Wenger kickstarts the whole sports science and recovery and diet and nutrition in this period. And that just goes on and develops into something completely new. I mean, you've got football players now in the Premier League have their own private chefs who have become celebrities in their own right. If you look at someone like Johnny Marsh, improved recruitment. I mean, if you think about the recruitment and the scouting system, how that's changed in the last 20 years, and tactical systems as well. So, we're inundated with tactics now. You can't go anywhere on any website or any YouTube channel without anyone giving you this tactical input about what's going on in the Premier League. So I think it's a sign of the times. I don't think it's a sign of quality. I did look at this and I did think, well, was the quality just poor? I think the quality was really high. And I think that's why the points for the overall winners wasn't as high as what it is now, because it was more of an even league.
I think you had as well that when it starts going into those, like, you got to get 90 plus points to win it. You look at like when the super owners came in and started buying football clubs. You look at like when Abramovich first came into Chelsea and those first few seasons. I remember that just, you'd open up the paper at the weekend and it was just all the players that Chelsea had signed. And you're like, well, they're going to end up having 2 starting 11s here. And I think that was the thing. You never really had that in the 90s and early noughties. That sort of came later as these people started buying up football clubs. It was like, well, I want 2 world-class players in every single position on the pitch, and like I say, now with the substitutes as well, it's almost like you finish with a totally different team at some point. Now as well, you can use 5 players. Back in the day, you couldn't.
So Arsenal have won the title, their first title in 6 years.
Oh, yeah, 91 was it?
Yeah, 91. Yes, That's right. But they go one better because they do the double. Although I was looking back and I had seen that Arsenal in the third round in that game they actually go to a replay and they only get through by beating Port Vale on penalties.
Yes, there was a couple of shootouts in that cup run, actually. We had when you look at the teams that we had to beat to get to the final, we had a fairly kind draw that year, but there was a few shootouts that we had to, I think we might have even had a replay at Palace that season, but we definitely had and then we had to have a replay against West Ham as well, and that went to penalties. Again, I'm harping on about Manninger, but he was in goal for that and did save the penalties to send it through. We ended up getting Wolves in the semi-final and winning just by the 1 goal, and Christopher Wray stuck it in because Bergkamp wasn't in there.
Christopher Wray. Did he go on to anything much after?
No, just really insignificant. Yeah, a bit of a journeyman after that. I think he did stay with us the following season, but he just kind of had this purple patch when we needed him and got a few really vital goals in the games that we needed, and that was his contribution.
And then you get Newcastle in the final. At this point, Newcastle are generally just proving benevolent opponents to just about anyone in finals that they play in.
But it was quite a frightening team, if I remember. I mean, Shearer was in very good form, and Alan Shearer actually hit the post in that game as well. I remember Seaman couldn't get anywhere near it, and it kind of just summed it up like it was inevitable that Arsenal were going to just do this double. They were a good side back then, Newcastle. They actually they were United's opponents in the 99 Cup final as well. So it was
Yeah.
back-to-back years for them. So yeah, a bit of a case of always the bridesmaid, never the bride for the late 90s, and they had to wait quite a while for their cup
Yes.
to come to them.
It did take a while.
Newcastle did have a few chances, but first half goal from Mark Overmars, nutmegging Shay Given, and then Nicholas Anelka steps up and really kind of announces himself on the world stage and scoring a goal in the cup final at Wembley, and the double was complete. And that's if you're really just sort of getting into football and you're being brainwashed by your uncle and your granddad, and you've got your first job, what better season do you want than just in the space of a few weeks you witness your team get 2 trophies? So
I mean, the danger is, why is it like this every year?
Yeah, well, yeah, I did. I remember having a conversation with my uncle when we were coming back from a game. I think we'd just drawn a game at St Andrews with Birmingham, I think 1-1, and in the late noughties, and we'd just bust the league again with a few games to go. And he just said to me, the trouble is, he was like, you've grown up witnessing, the most successful period in the club's history.
Yeah.
It's probably not going to get any better than that, like those few years that you've just seen.
We will have a look at what happens the following season and talk a little bit about the legacy, and there is quite some legacy of Arsène Wenger after the break, slightly quite late on in the thing, but artistic reasons we're having it later now, but we'll catch up on the next period after the break. Okay, so welcome back. We're looking at Arsène Wenger's first full season in charge, in which he wins the double, and he's done it. So that should be the end of the pod. But we just want to kind of have a little look at the season that comes after. It's a pretty memorable season, and it's still sort of the same team. And as you said, Jamie, have said, it's a kind of what ifs kind of thing, because Arsenal end up empty-handed, but actually could have won the double again, really. So it's an absolutely fascinating season. There's some notable transfer business. I know you referenced it before. Wright had kind of run his time. Obviously, Anelka is in there, and Wright is sold to West Ham. David Platt retires. The bit of business, well, fair play. You can tell me if you ever saw him play. Arsenal sell Isaiah Rankin to Bradford for 1.3 million.
I don't even know who that player is.
No. Is he familiar to you, Jamie? I've had to do a quick bit of Wikipedia work. I'll just tell you, this list of clubs afterwards seem to be Barnsley, Grimsby, Brentford, Grimsby, Stevenage, Crawley, Forest Green, Ashford Town, Hendon. So it looks like good business to me from Arsenal.
You see, we're terrible at selling players. That's
more seriously, you do bring in some more crucial players in this season, don't you? And there's a couple in particular who stand out. Yeah,
Freddie Ljungberg was a great signing for us here, and a guy who absolutely loved a goal against Manchester United. He just seemed to always turn up on Super Sunday on Sky Sports and put the ball in the back of the net up at Old Trafford. But he scored a lot of goals at Highbury against United as well. I believe we signed Nelson Vivas this season as well. Argentinian defender, really old school, wearing the number 7 shirt as a defender, which I just can't quite get my head around. I'm quite pernickety with my squad numbers, so I guess he was kind of a defensive midfielder, so maybe he could get away with it, but the number 7 should be out on the wing always.
You'll be a fan of Asamoah Gyan wearing number 3 as a centre forward, then, are you?
No, and there's wasn't it Milan Barros for Liverpool who wore number 5 up front as well, which always sticks in my mind. I don't like that.
Yeah, I'm with you though, Andrew. I also believe that the numbers match the positions that they should be on the pitch, and Yeah, number 7 is the glamour number as well.
I kind of feel like there wasn't much to change from the squad from the double winning season. It just kind of needed a few sprinkles of new players in there. And yeah, Lundberg coming in on the wing, I think was a really nice addition, but there were no real signings with the defence. It was the same defence and the same sort of spine and foundation of the team that won the double. So we didn't really need to change it that much.
He signs Kanu aged, well, who knows how old Kanu was either then or at any point in his career.
He comes in January. I think he comes in the winter transfer window, Kanu. But yeah, you're right. But it's like the Freddie Adu, isn't he? How old is he really? Kind of like the mystery.
So Arsenal, they get the season started with a Charity Shield win. And Jamie, you seem to have some nightmares of this. This is Arsenal United, and Arsenal hit the ground running. And it's a difficult start for Stam, isn't it?
Yeah, Jaap Stam signed for United that season and has come with a big reputation, a big guy. And his debut is the Charity Shield. Arsenal are head and shoulders the best team on the day. They are the champions, and they absolutely put down the marker that they are going to be the team to be. I think they demolished United 3-0. But Nicolas Anelka, I mean, a fantastic footballer, as already mentioned. He just absolutely tears. I mean, Jaap Stam's quite fast, and Nicolas Anelka makes Stam look like a donkey. It's embarrassing, really, for a debut. A striking performance from Anelka, and you're kind of questioning who is this Jaap Stam fella, and is he going to last, until October?
He had a great season that year as well. Well, he had a good start to the season, Anelka. I think in the end, he scored 17 Premier League goals that season, but really he was in exit mode from about the end of January onwards, and then especially towards the end of the season, I remember some games where he was playing and it was just didn't even want the ball. He just wasn't moving because his brothers had been in his ear and they'd engineered the move away, and he decided that that was it. He was going to go, and Arsenal were going to cash in.
I mean, fair play. Arsenal did cash in, and they cashed in really well. But I mean, I don't know. Football agents is a whole different debate. But when you've got family, there's a conflict of interest because his brothers are going to make a lot of money by moving Nicolas Anelka from one place to another, acting as on behalf of his agents. So it really is a conflict of interest, and it is another what if. I think, Andrew, you already mentioned it, because Anelka was just sensational, and I mean, you get a good upgrade a year or two later.
Yeah,
but. So it works out well for Arsenal. They get a record fee for Anelka, but it's just a shame that Anelka had that kind of influence in his. I mean, who knows really what goes on? But what we do know is that Nicolas Anelka's brothers benefit financially from his move to Real Madrid.
Yeah, and we bank the money and then go on and sign an underperforming Thierry Henry, who was playing left midfield for Juventus at the time.
Yeah.
I think Fergie had said he'd kind of. Man United had been looking at him and they were like, well, we don't need anyone on the wing. But it was Wenger that saw him and thought, okay, right, we can kind of engineer this player into a number 9 maybe. And the rest is history. Had Anelka not had his move engineered for him and stayed with Arsenal and really been on it for the full season and scored maybe 4 or 5 more goals, would that have been enough to have clinched us the title? Would he have stayed and been our record goal scorer? Who knows?
It's a slow start for Arsenal in this season. They win the first game, but then it's a succession of draws until they play United. And at this point, I mean, it is going to change, but at this point, they have an unbelievable record in the head-to-heads against United, don't they? They win 3-0, and they do seem to have the sign over Ferguson's United.
I think it's 4 wins in a row. So you can understand why Ferguson is seeing Wenger as a serious threat. Not only has he come along and won the league in his very first season, he's won a double. And every time the two managers get together, Wenger's coming away with the spoils. Not only coming away with the spoils, I think most of the time clean sheets as well. United aren't able to break down this Arsenal team to get a goal. I think there was a couple of goals in the first game at Highbury in Wenger's first full season. But after that, it's I think it's 1-0, 3-0, 3-0 from memory. The next 3 games
until we got to the semi-final at Villa Park in this season, which I remember watching that first game and just how tight it was and how neither side really was willing to commit to anything or made it. I think it was 0-0, wasn't it? The first game?
It was 0-0. Yeah, Villa Park. I was at that one. Stressed with that one. But yeah, it's a really tight game. I mean, there's nothing between these two teams. The two teams are really bringing out the best of each other. And the rivalry between Ferguson and Wenger is really growing into something that is just, it's just TV gold. And, you know, Sky Sports, who are covering these football matches, are absolutely milking every moment of it as well when these two get together. They really are.
I feel like this game in this season was the kind of the pivotal moment for everything, because they could hardly be separated throughout the whole season. They couldn't be separated in the first game, so it goes to a replay, and we have to have it must have been a midweek replay under the lights back at Villa Park. Yeah, there's a couple of moments in this game where you feel like if it goes the other way, it would change everything about the season. Like it was clear whoever was going to win that game, even though it was to do with the FA Cup, it was like they're then going to go on and win the league. A lot like what's kind of going on this season, where we've got our League Cup final against City. Yeah. It's already being talked about that whoever wins that is going to kick on and go and take the Premier League. It felt like there was everything on the line with this game, and there were moments in it. I mean, it was Arsenal's to take. We could have all we had to do was reach out and grab it. Roy Keane sent off, and then a penalty awarded, and Dennis Bergkamp steps up. And if you're going to back anyone in an FA Cup semi-final to score a penalty, it would be your star number 10. And Peter Schmeichel pulls some heroics out of the hat. And there are just so many moments in this game where it just falls for Man United, and so many errors by key Arsenal players as well, which dictates what happens for the rest of the season in just a few minutes of football, basically.
I completely agree. It really is the pivotal moment. And for me, Arsenal are the better of the two teams going into this. I mean, I think Arsenal in all competitions are unbeaten in 20 games. Since mid-December, they've gone on another incredible run. There's nothing between the two teams in terms of the league competition. And I think it boils down to the penalty, basically. You know, Keane's gone off. At that point, you're thinking, this is Arsenal's all day long. I mean, to beat Arsenal with 11 players on the pitch is really, really, really hard. To do it with 10, it's impossible. You kind of given up. And when, you know, Dennis Bergkamp gets the penalty, you're thinking, it's Dennis Bergkamp. He's definitely going to score this because of the quality of the man. But yeah, Schmeichel makes an incredible save. I said this before, Andrew, you won't appreciate it. My favourite moment is when Phil Neville goes to congratulate Peter Schmeichel after saving the penalty, because he's so relieved because he's pulled down Parler, a terrible tackle in the box, hit the penalty away. And Schmeichel has to almost punch him away because Schmeichel's only parried the ball back into play. And Philip Neville has forgot to do his job and defend. He's so relieved that Schmeichel saved it. He just wants to kiss and cuddle him, whereas Schmeichel has to punch him off. But yeah, I think it comes down to that. I think, you know, Bergkamp scores that penalty. Arsenal go on to the FA Cup final. They definitely beat Newcastle. It's a weaker Newcastle than the one that they beat the year before. Oh, they would have beat the year before. I think they do go on and win the league as well. And it's a double-double for Arsène Wenger. It's such a small margin.
But it was still, just because he missed that, it wasn't like the game was lost. We went into extra time then, and we were still playing against. So, okay, we've missed the penalty. I actually don't think Bergkamp ever took another penalty from open play after that. Or don't quote me on that. I don't think he did though after that, or I certainly know he didn't want to after that. But the game wasn't lost, and we were still playing against 10 men. And this is where you've got star players for Arsenal that just have this like football meltdown in this game. Bergkamp misses the penalty, and then Patrick Vieira, of all people in the midfield, just passes the ball to Ryan Giggs on the halfway line. and then you've got Giggs running at this fully experienced Arsenal backline. Why Lee Dixon just doesn't kick kick his back leg out?
I agree.
Is beyond me. But Giggs takes it round everyone, and beats David Seaman, who, I mean, at the time, arguably Seaman and Schmeichel were probably the two best goalkeepers in the world, really, at this stage. And it's one of the greatest goals that's ever been scored in FA Cup history, unfortunately.
Unfortunately as well, because he takes his shirt off and we all have to put up with that chest. So, I mean, it's probably the hairiest chest in FA Cup history as well. And the hairiest back in FA Cup history.
An image which every Arsenal fan wants to scrub from their mind, but can't ever do it.
And Arsenal, they're super unlucky in the league as well, having gone on that run. I think it's 16 wins, a 19-game run, 16 wins, 3 draws. They're on this incredible run again. 1 defeat against Leeds, and that's the one that just cost them. They end up missing out on the league by a point. I mean, it's such small margins from Wenger doubling up on the double.
But Wenger says about when we lost that game to United, he couldn't get over the emotion of the United players and Fergie that they'd beaten Arsenal. And it was almost like we'd lost the FA Cup semi-final, but also it must have felt like when the players went back in the dressing room, like that was it, that was the league, that was the league gone. And we never recovered from that game that season. I remember listening to the Leeds game again on my on my stereo in my bedroom. I think it was Jimmy Floyd Hasselbank scored for Leeds, and you're just like sitting there like, well, that's it. It's it's all over. I think we were relying on the one team we really don't want to rely on to go to Old Trafford on the final day and see us right. It's only happened a couple of times in my lifetime. Where you do have to give that lot from down the road a cheer, but right at the start of the game, it looked like the incredible might actually happen, because Spurs actually went 1-0 up in that game before they realised, shit, okay, we really just need to lose this now and hand the title to United.
One other thing that's probably worth touching on in this season, because it is quite a bizarre thing, but I mean, we talk about Europe, and obviously the UEFA Cup run was very brief and not very successful in the previous season, but you're in the European Cup or Champions. Is it Champions League by this stage?
Champions League, yeah.
And the decision's made to play Arsenal to play their home games at Wembley, isn't it? Which kind of a move that sort of backfires, I guess.
That was purely down to commercial reasons, because it was also down to the teams that we had got in the draw that season. So we could effectively pull a much bigger crowd and sell out Wembley for those games. So I think the gate receipts alone would be double at Wembley than what they would be at Highbury. But obviously, when you go to Wembley, you lose that Highbury atmosphere. You lose the tight pitch. Commercially, it was obviously a success, but we had some absolutely shocking games at Wembley from what I remember from those Champions League games. I remember one season against Fiorentina and Gabriel Batistuta smashing one in against us, and there were a lot of losses. And
I think the Champions League campaign at Wembley, I completely get it. You're going to bring, I mean, I think the average attendance was 73,000 across the 3 games. So, commercially, why wouldn't you want to take that revenue? But I think it comes down to the home game at Wembley against Kiev, Dynamo Kiev, when Rebrov scores pretty much with the last kick of the game. So Arsenal draw that game in the last second, but they're still top of the group with 3 games to go, and they're still clear. But if they win that, I think that almost guarantees them a place into the knockouts. And Dynamo Kiev go all the way to the semi-final in that competition where they lose to Bayern Munich. So it's a good Dynamo Kiev team. So I just feel it's it's another missed opportunity for Wenger and Arsenal, and it's a big if. But the games at Highbury, it's a different atmosphere, isn't it, Andrew? They're going to bring a different type of game. They're not going to lose the Lons at home at Highbury, surely.
No, and we lost that game 1-0.
Yeah.
Mm.
I mean, we only did this at Wembley for a couple of seasons before we then actually started playing the games at Highbury, and then started to do a lot better in Europe. But yeah, I mean, it was a commercial exercise and not something that worked. It's strange as well when you think how it really took Wenger quite a few seasons to sort of get to grips with Europe, whereas the domestic game, he got to grips with it very, very quickly. Yeah, tactically, and we were very, very poor under it. But maybe it kind of got a bit glossed over because we were having a lot of success domestically, going deep into cup competitions, and everyone kind of, there were lots of cup finals and semi-finals and going for the league title. It was just like, oh, well, we're not very good in Europe. Let's just focus on the domestic stuff.
So that season ends, and this, I suppose, this is where there's a slight bridge until you then get into the Invincibles, which is, I guess, 3 seasons away.
But there's a league title before that as well. So
the league
title,
and another FA and a couple of FA Cups as well.
Yeah.
You see, this is what, when you support a team that wins more than one thing in their lifetime, it's hard to keep track. Whereas I know exactly I can easily keep track of what we won. Well, we should get to ranking this Arsène Wenger side, shouldn't we? I think. As a reminder, we have 5 categories of greatness, from all-time greats right at the top, true greats, mid-tier category, touch of greatness, edge of greatness, our second bottom category, and blink of greats right at the bottom. Jamie, where would you put this Arsenal side?
Yeah, I'm quite troubled on this one because I genuinely do remember this team with great fondness, and it was a brilliant time. The Wenger-Ferguson rivalry was just sensational, and I miss it dreadfully. We didn't talk about the run as well in detail. When they won the double in 97-98, they take 45 points from a possible 51 in their run. I mean, it's incredible. Not even like Manchester City in their heyday under Pep was, I think, at that level, not far off it. But that's an incredible run in terms of the points collected in those games. Arsène Wenger has changed English football, and we benefit from the game now because of Arsène Wenger. So that's quite a big statement. That's quite a big thing, not just the diet, the tactics, the influence of foreign coaches. I think we talked about when Wenger comes into the Premier League, there are 90% British coaches or related to British. When Wenger leaves, I think it's 45% are British. So it's slashed in half. So that's the influence of the man. In any other walk of life, this is all-time greats. The European issue does haunt me a little bit on this. And that's the thing that troubles me. And I think because of that, I'm going to start us off in the second tier, true greats. But we're so close to all-time greats, Graham, I think, in terms of where this team is.
Andrew, what do you reckon?
No, I agree. I think we go in the second tier just because of that game against United and that semi-final, because if we do win that and we then go on and do a historic double-double, they would be the all-time. Arguably, would that be even better than going a full season unbeaten, actually winning the cup and the league back-to-back in back-to-back seasons? But they do need their flowers because that really was a fantastic team. It was a great mishmash of old and new, and Le Professeur coming in with his no Mars bars and no ketchup and no alcohol, and he very nearly did it back to back in those seasons. Look, if we hadn't have lost that game and we hadn't have lost the league by 1 point, would the Invincibles ever happen? Did Wenger kind of need to have that bitter taste of losing out right at the very end to then perfect the team and eventually go on? Because it was he did call it with the Invincibles that season. He said that it had kind of been building up to that for quite a few years, and then he put it to the team in the dressing room. Okay, you now have to do something exceptional and go the full season unbeaten. Maybe we wouldn't have got that if he'd have done the double. I don't know.
Yeah, I think you're right. You can't. Doing the double would have been the one way to sort of cover up for disappointing European element. The only other way of covering up for disappointing Europe is to stay unbeaten throughout the entire season and do the double. So, I think also you kind of know with Wenger there are, and it would be easy if you grouped, and there are players who play across this whole period. Vieira's across the whole thing, for example. If you grouped it all together as one team, that would be all-time greats, wouldn't it? But I think once you know there are two teams, and I think it's important to separate out this team because it is exactly as you say, Andrew. It's a kind of forgotten one. It's off the radar of stuff. I think, but we have to say, Arsène Wenger's first Arsenal side, true greats. Andrew, thank you so much.
Cool, thank you.
That's been fantastic. And I do love the thing, and you've touched on when we've spoken about this beforehand, it is the beauty of the random players who step up.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when Seaman got injured, everyone was really everyone was just like, what the hell are we going to do now? And then the game against Chelsea when Stephen Hughes steps up and just smashes in 2 goals.
Yeah.
There was such a lot of injuries to players that season. And like you say, everyone just kind of thinks it's the famous back line. It's Parla, Vieira, Petit, Overmars and Bergkamp and Anelka. But yeah, there was a lot of, obviously I remember it, but if you don't support Arsenal, you probably just think, oh, well, it was the same team that played week in, week out. But yeah, it was a proper mishmash.
Yeah, it was. I mean, we didn't even cover Grimondi and Remy Gard, who also played
But he was awful. I couldn't stand Grimondi, and Remy Gard was awful as well. So I'm quite glad we didn't touch on them.
Jamie, thank you for your hard efforts this week as well. I see you managed to find another opportunity to talk about Ryan Giggs and Man United semi-final. Cross up every week.
We do need to stop. I have to say, I'm getting tired of it. But I think it was impossible to talk about this brilliant Arsenal team without talking about Manchester United, because this is where the rivalry really goes up another level. I think we need to get into a few teams where we don't talk about Manchester United, and we can get back to talking about Oxford United at any given opportunity.
We did get Oxford in this one, though.
Yes, thank you.
You did. And you done it, yes.
Yeah, you did well. You did well on that.
Top marks.
We definitely won't get Oxford United in, and we won't be talking about the FA Cup semi-final again. But unbelievably, like buses, you wait for them to arrive, and then 2 come along at a time, because we're doing another Arsenal team, but this time we are going right back to the start. Next week, we'll be back with Herbert Chapman's Arsenal.